still have the clean. Sitting behind the back door, all shiny and clean.
I go, this is a lot easier this year. We got our fine arts done. Oh my gosh. That's busy. Then you have lots of ciphers.
Yeah.
Yeah, performance as well.
Spanish immersion, so he doesn't have any director studies or anything. I'm not sick, I just
The good one. This is not like those other ones we've been getting. So. Okay. Yes.
Oh, I know, I saw that.
Yeah, so I gave her your injected.
Anyway, so, but I went down there. Yeah, it really is. We went down, but we watched it. Yeah, because it was raining, off and on. But I'm not a big gambler, so my $20 is already gone. We have no day season, so I ended up spending another $40. But that's all about it.
David had him for 2 years. Yeah. It's like a different practice.
That's right. That's so true.
Yeah, thank you very much. That's exciting.
I hear it over and over from kids that even
Oh,
from the
okay.
parents.
Sorry. We're just talking too much. Okay, we'll call this meeting to order for the board work session. And then, did you know she didn't respond to me? I sent out the email reminder. I have not heard if she's.
I met with Norm yesterday and didn't hear anything.
So we'll proceed and hand it over to. There's nobody here to address, so we don't have to do that. So, Dr. Marker,
Well, I will speak just briefly about the topic of the day is grading practices. And really our point today is to talk to you about everything that will go into policy development, committee development and conversation, and then ultimately a decision on the entire grading practices, and not just the thing that we get a lot of conversation about, which is the grading scale. That's just a piece of what we'll talk about throughout this year, and here to really guide us through what that process will look like is Dr. Boyce.
Thank you. So we're here to talk about that policy IKA, grading and recovery, and the regulation that goes along with that. And we talk simultaneously on policies and regulations. So we'll really dive into that. Our grading policies are reviewed, or our policies are reviewed every 5 years. And to review that policy IKA grading and recovery system, we convene some work groups, because as you will see, there are many parts to this policy and regulation, and it takes a little deeper dive. When you think there's 13 pages to this reg, there's a lot of information, and we really wanted to go through that to make sure what we are currently practicing is reflected in that policy. So as we start looking through this IKA, the grading and recovery regulation, there are many parts in there, and I've listed these parts up there. So the first one is grading and reporting. So in grading and reporting, there's methods and frequencies. So how are we communicating with parents and letting them know how their students are doing? We have our reporting instruments, and the reporting instruments are the grading scale. Where at elementary, it's a standard-based grading scale. So within this regulation, it's broken out by grade levels. And then we have alternate curriculum reporting, which provides guidance for us with students for accommodations. We have the grading and credit, and that's the high school credit, specifically for students taking high school courses in middle school. Absences and makeup work, provisions for recovery of grades, guidelines for district semester tests, students dropping a course, and grading and privacy guidelines. So when you look at this regulation, a lot of information in there, and that the regulation is based on the Sioux Falls School District's philosophy on grading to promote consistency in grading and reporting student progress. The procedures consider similarities among grade levels, elementary, middle, and high school, as well as individual differences within each of the levels. And the variations reflect the developmental needs of students and programs at each level. And so that's all within that regulation. So it's a big project, so how are we going to tackle it? So if we look at that one policy and regulation, and as we started going through that, there are complications in how it interferes with other policies and regulations. And so if we make any changes to IKA, we have 6 other policies and regulations that will be impacted. IKB is our homework. And so how we treat homework, is it a grade, is it not a grade? IKC, the calculation of grade point average and class rank, and the grading scale is in that policy, and weighted grades. We have IKE, and that's the promotion and retention and acceleration of students. IKA, or IKF, is our graduation requirements, and we did some revisions to that last year with the new state graduation requirements, but dual credit is in there, and credit before 9th grade, and guidance on students that transfer into the district and how we help support them to get them to the finish line. And then JH, student attendance, which includes makeup work and recovery, and that's a big piece of our work in this in policy IKA. And then OSS, or students who have been suspended, and how does their work and their credit for any of the work they do. So the review of IKA includes, like I said, 6 additional policies, and it's a big process to begin that with. So how did we do that? We started by forming 3 committees, and you'll say, well, I see middle school, high school, but where's the elementary? Elementary, when they reviewed that standard base, they feel comfortable with where they're at right there with that piece of the policy, but they are represented in the administrator groups. So the middle school committee was joined, the high school, and those 2 committees are doing some work. They will come together to compare information, because we know that middle school and high school touch with students at middle school taking high school work, and we want to make sure we have that alignment. And the administrator group is working off to the side, really looking at the language within that regulation, and is it following our practices that we're currently doing, and what work needs to be done. The administrator group started last year and really worked through that, and as we dove into it, we realized we needed more time, and that's how it flowed over into this year. And so we formed the middle school and the high school committee, and on each of those committees, we have teachers from the classroom, special education, ELL, we have counselors, we have parents, we have university partners, and we have administrators. And the university partners in the high school committee, they really help us with that alignment and how students transition into that post-secondary. What are the colleges looking for on that transcript, and how's that impact scholarships? And so they're able, we have 4 university partners, and they're able to give us some really good feedback from the committee. So I'll dive into each one of those areas a little bit, just to give you some ideas of what we're doing with that work at each of the levels. So at the middle school committee, they really started to looking at teaching and learning. and how are we communicating with our students and parents of what our students really know and are able to do. And started that movement towards a little bit of that standard-based learning and grading practices. They started that work last year and they're continuing this year. Last year they read the book Grading Cleanse. So really looking at what our students, what can they do and how do we show that information to the students and parents, and so the students know where they're going. So if you look at that those first two areas, that priority standards, that's really what do the students know and are they able to do? And if we look at that as the priority standards is the whole recipe for our students' learning, and the learning targets are the ingredients. So what ingredients do we need to put together so we have a great outcome for our students? And the proficiency scales are the rubrics that the staff are working at putting together so they can measure the learning targets, and the summative assessments are the measurement of that. And then they feed up. So if we look at right here, the priority standards and the learning targets, those two come together. And right now, our middle school teams are really working on, in their Java Lights, to create those learning targets and build common formative assessments. They give the students the common formative assessments. The groups come together in collaboration. They talk about how our students are doing and growing. They provide interventions and supports for growth, and then they reassess and make sure that's working. So the first step was the learner behaviors at middle school, and we've always had the learner behaviors that were on a rubric, and very small, but the new area this year is right here, independent practice, and that's homework. So they took homework off the other side of the report card and they put it in the learner behaviors because we don't feel that homework should be graded. Because if I'm practicing, an assignment can be graded, but homework is practice. It's just like going out and shooting baskets. We don't get graded on our practice shooting baskets, but we get graded at the game. So that's middle school work. And so that continues, and they'll continue on that work throughout the year and into next year if we don't get completely finished this year, because it's a big project and we want to do it well. We want the staff to feel really comfortable with that. Then we move into that high school. And high school committee was formed again. You saw all the members of that committee. We've met once. Our second meeting is tomorrow night. And here were the objectives we laid out. We want to review that current policy and regulation regarding grading and recovery in Sioux Falls School District. We surveyed other selected school districts to really look at their policies and practices and grading scales. And that was a good look, and the committee tomorrow night will get to look at all those different area and then across the nation school districts of like size. And some are smaller because within our region. And we'll review that information pertaining to advantages and disadvantages of changing that grading scale. We are on the 7-point scale. We'll look at the 10-point scale, which our universities use, and we'll look at those and compare a transcript of what a Sioux Falls student's transcript would look like with our current scale, but then also with that 10-point. And then talk with our college admissions to find out what's the impact on scholarships on the 10-point versus 7-point scale. Again, analyze a Sioux Falls School District's transcript. And then if there is a change recommended, we need to look at what would a transition process look like for that and how would that impact moving forward with students. So that's the work outlined for that committee. And then we divided that committee into 3 groups to do the work, because there's a lot of work on that last slide. So tomorrow night, they'll come together and we have one group that's IKC, which is the calculation of GPA class rank. So they're really looking at weighted grades and class rank, and that's their focus. We have another group on IKA, and that's really looking at the comparison of those grading scales and the impact on post-secondary. And the third group will work on dual credit. And because that's a big question right now, students taking a 3-credit class get 3 credits from the university and they get a half credit from Sioux Falls School. And so how do we do we make a change there? Do you leave it that way? That's a conversation that we're having. And again, that was a question we asked when we surveyed area districts. How do you process that? And really looking at that. And then they'll begin talking about that transition process, that there's changes. So middle school committee's working, high school committee's working on their own. And then our third group is our administrator group, reviewing the policy and the current practices and how those that policy intersects with other policies. And so we've had elementary group going through that regulation, making changes, special education going through making changes, middle school, high school, and then we'll bring middle school and high school together to make sure that they agree with the changes because, like I said, they intersect. And then what we'll do is we'll take our middle school, high school group, and our admin group, and we'll bring them together. And then we'll come forward with a recommendation. And so with that, we'll really look at the grading and recovery system, the goal being that we share our findings in late January, early February. And then we'll meet with high school staff to share the process and the outcome. No matter what it is, they need to know that what process we went through, how we looked at it, any changes, and middle school is deeply involved with their part already, but we want to make sure high school knows the process that we've taken. And if there's a change, because we don't know that at this point. And then what our goal is to have it to policy review in March, but knowing that if this, whatever changes here, we'll have to review those other 6 policies to make sure that we change any language with that. So that would be a big policy review. That's a grading system policy and review, but questions you have?
On the middle school committee question, first of all, if taking homework out of the grading process, which I understand, will we be able to do a study and see if grades go down? Because, for example, if a student has test anxiety and homework would be a way for them to boost their grade, to get that, how do we process that and look at that going forward?
Yep. So we can really look at the scores, the student scores and the outcomes, and really it's teaching for mastery. So if I'm doing well along the way, but then I don't do well on that summative assessment, so then the teacher can sit back in there and really help to determine, is it test anxiety or is it I didn't know the content?
Because we all realize, because we have middle school students, that the grades in middle school don't matter as much, but it does lead to things like we have the honor society in middle school and things like that. So it would affect those things. So I just want us to make sure that we're recognizing that as a factor and take that into consideration. And
will you allow me to address that, Cynthia? So I think too that we need to be careful to figure out what accountability is there then for that work. If we're going to have the students practice it, to use your analogy, Dr. Boyson, maybe I don't get graded on those free throws, but as a coach, I decide whether or not you're going to play in that game to get assessed. So there's got to be some accountability there for the homework that we assign.
Thank you. And for people at home, this was obviously on the review time to do this, but it came to the forefront. There were some parents looking at colleges and comparing us with our 7-point scale with the 10-point scale. So I'm very glad our district's going through this process to kind of make sure we're being competitive for our high school students applying to colleges, et cetera, to make sure that they're not missing out on scholarships or admissions based on our classroom differentials.
No, I haven't. I have conferences next week at middle school, but I have been looking on Infinite Campus, and you can tell a very big difference in what I used to see last year with grades compared to what you see this year. And so I will be curious to just talk to the teachers, because you used to say, oh, you didn't turn your homework in, or you didn't, and you could see along the way kind of their mastery or their turning in of grades. And now I feel kind of as a parent, I'm like, well, did you not have anything? What are you supposed to be doing? So I'll be curious to see and learn more about that from teachers next week when I get a chance to meet with for my own child, because I'm trying to figure this out. It just looks different. So I think it's but that we're talking about this and that people are aware of that we're not just, it's not that it doesn't matter. It's just that we're looking at it in a different way, and homework is still important. It still, helps them to master those skills, and they need to turn it in, and the teachers need to assess it, and give feedback, but it's not going to be a point value.
And it really does help guide their instruction. I mean, they need to realize how they're doing, and it's a check for understanding. So it is, it's a big process. There's lots of information there, differences between levels, but really making sure that we communicate with parents so that way they understand that process, and making sure we're doing what's best for kids.
So is there a way if parents have questions, what would be best to reach out to their teachers probably first?
Right. I would suggest teachers and then building administration, but they can always call down here too. And we'll update you as we go.
Dr. Boyson, I have another question. Or maybe more of a comment. The dual credit versus the high school credit. The half credit for a high school class and the 3 credits. This is awkward.
Yep, I know, I'm sorry.
And the 3 credits for the college course. I'm not sure if I know exactly where the committee's going with that, but how many credits do our students need to graduate?
22.
Exactly. I know.
Oh, I know.
So that is 1/44 of what they need for their 4-year diploma. The college giving 3 credits is, I'm assuming a bachelor's degree is still 128 semester hours.
Yes.
Okay. So those 3 hours are if I round up, 1/43 of the credits needed. So I would contend that those are the same.
Okay.
I don't know that. Let me take it a step further. If we would give 3 credits, and I don't know that's what you were alluding to,
no.
but if we would, it would be 1/7.
Right.
So the math person in me had to do it that way.
Yep.
The question for them because college algebra is a semester class in college. College algebra is a year in
Sioux Falls School.
Sioux Falls School.
So that's right. So really looking, no, you're right. Yeah.
And so is there a difference? But then with the other classes, you're on 2 credits in a semester in high school, and it also is semester. But 2 credits is usually college in all schools semester in high school. So
Really examining.
and algebra is when you still have algebra 1, so college algebra you have to.
And then some districts don't do any, they acknowledge, sure, you took dual credit, but they just acknowledge that. There's no bonus or anything for students, but they just acknowledge that. So it's really been good information for the committee and really looking at the differences, because even within our region, everybody's all over the board on, they might do a 7-point scale, but then they don't give D's, they give E's, and they give plus and minuses. So it really is a deep dive.
What I really like about the process you have in place, and the committee work, and the number of people who are involved, is whatever grading scale we come up with going forward, whether it's we stay with what we have or we move to another one, it will be because we have some rationale for what we're doing. And I think it's been a while since we've looked at it. So right now we kind of have what we have because we've always had it. So I think the intentionality is good, regardless of what the outcome is.
That was 2000 when we did that weighted grades. So before that was the grading scale. So it's been a long time.
From an implementation standpoint for the grading scale, would we make retroactive the grading scale? So if a student was in 10th grade, for example, would the 9th grade and 10th grade year fall in line with what their junior year would look like? So when we're sending the transcript, it's kind of
it's all the same.
tight, all the same.
Good question. And that's one of our committees, is that's something they're looking at, is what would that transition process look like? because we do have to be very aware of that transcript moving on to post-secondary.
Yeah.
So I don't have an answer for you on that yet.
If there's an easy algorithm with the software, given that we already have the percentages, it might make sense to look at a holistic picture for that student and how that is conveyed for their high school transcript to the college admissions.
Yeah, and I'm not sure, Infinite Campus runs all of ours for us, and I'm not sure how that whole programming piece, but that's something, as we go through this process, that's part of it, is if we make a change, what's that transition process look like? And that would be something we'd have to look into. And we have those 4 university representatives on there, so they can give us good feedback on, when looking at transcripts, what would be the hindrance on that if we had 2 different grading scales represented on there, right? Well, because your GPA or half, it gets messy. And you can't have, we know that we have students sitting of all levels sitting in classes together, and so you can't say, well, you're on the new grading scale and you're on the old grading scale. It wouldn't really. So.
Your depth of knowledge and the people you brought in to help further that, and the scope is impressive. So thanks.
We have great people in the community that want to be involved. When you reach out to people, they're just, yes. So thank goodness.
Did you ask them if they wanted to be on the boundary committee?
I get it.
Crickets.
We're actually getting good feedback there too.
Okay. No further questions or comments. We'll move on to committee assignment reports. Mr.
We
Tolkien.
have absolutely none. Although you do have your budget printed, Sports Authority is off this month. They're still working on housing. Probably won't get that going until the first of the year. So like I said, she's asked me to help her come up with a group. So if you have some names that you think might be good, I'd sure love to have those. That's all I do.
Okay. I'll start. Let's see, budget. We haven't, as Mr. Tolkien said, we have not met, but we have our printed out for 1920. Sioux Empire Leadership, we met on September 18th. Next meeting is November 20th due to a lot of people are going to be gone during the October meeting. Last night at the City Council, the Triage Center moved forward in a roundabout way in the fact that the City Council did approve the build out of the 3rd floor of the City Center, which will allow the IT to move into that, which then the Triage can move into the current IT building, which is the former Falls Health building downtown. So that's great. Our next focus that we all kind of came to consensus would be the affordable housing issue as well. And I believe Shelley is going to come present to us. And same thing, they asked for help with the committee. Then they're posting the minutes from our meeting on the chamber website if anybody's interested in seeing those. And the RFP for the actual triage contract will probably is in draft form right now, but will be out soon. Let's see, Southeast Tech Council, probably hear a lot later in their meeting, so I won't go too deep into the details on that because I think the board meeting will go over a lot of what we covered, but we met September 17th, the next is the 19th. The new program for wireless infrastructure will be up to the Board of Tech at their October meeting. Yesterday I attended, there was the Vet Tech announcement. There was a focus on Smithfield, the national CEO came in and presented a check for $250,000 to Southeast Tech for the Vet Tech program. The state of South Dakota, then because now all the money's been raised, presented their $500,000 check to help finalize that Vet Tech. So that was quite exciting. They gave an economics professor from the state give a whole talk about trade and how that impacts our markets, specifically in the commodities world. And let's see, they're going to look into, Southeast Tech is going to look into presenting to people what a day in the life of a tech student is. So they haven't set a date or time for that yet, but if you guys are interested in attending something like that, let me know. It's going to be open to the public. We'll get the admissions report at the board meeting. And the, I thought this was important. I don't know if they'll cover this, but an interesting, not just admissions, but our retention rate. In 2016, it was 71%. In 2018, it was 75%. So what they're doing to keep people who have once signed up in there is working. Let's see. And there's going to be health care sector breakfast on October 24th, and I know board member Ryder is looking to attend. And then Sioux Falls Chamber of Commerce, we met September 25th. The next board meeting is the 23rd. The October 22nd is the annual meeting, and I know Dr. Maher has invited all board members to attend if they'd like. The new officers were elected, and Bobby Thury is the chair, Dan Doyle is the chair-elect, vice chair is Alex Ramirez, and treasurer is Paul Hansen. And the membership chair should be wrapping up the search for that, and hopefully end of the month, beginning of next month, announcing the president CEO search is hopefully end of November. And they're going to have a November 11th Veterans Day program at Lincoln High School at 10:30 a.m.
I did not put up policies, but we have 4 or 5 financial related policies, no major changes. So you'll see those up for review, revise on the next board meeting. Probably the Leadership Council. The only other committee we met earlier in the month, and I apologize if I didn't bring my notes, but we just talked about various intersections and schools that are looking for either four-way stops or crosswalks.
We talked about policy. We don't meet for calendar yet, and I was not able to attend insurance, so I sent him So that's all I have. Yes.
Well, it's profoundly important work that we do on insurance, and I will say we've moved 2 steps closer to approve the package that will be brought forth for teachers and administrators. We all have put together people that are very confident and very good hands on insurance committee. Thank you for signing this. The Sioux Falls Education Foundation met. If I could impress one important date for you on your calendar, then that would be November 7th. Please plan to attend the first annual Public School Proud fundraiser. You can purchase tickets on the website. It'll start at 6 o'clock. It's at Raven Industries. We have some tremendous sponsors for the event, and with you all there, in addition to the other people coming, there'll be a lot of good people as well. So November 7th, 6 o'clock. Thanks. You've got your tickets. Great. Oh, I look forward to seeing all of you there.
More of the reports?
I just want to add, not report related, but you may have seen in the news that the volleyball teams in Sioux Falls from all of the high schools, including O'Gorman, played each other last night. Lincoln had hosted O'Gorman and Washington hosted Roosevelt. And so because it was all within Sioux Falls, we did a food drive for Feeding South Dakota. And so each team kind of that was playing against each other on the court also went head to head. And all 4 of the high schools together competed to see who could raise the most number of items of canned food. And at the end of the night, Washington won, but total raised just last night was 8,267 canned food items that then Feeding South Dakota was coming to the high schools today to pick up. So it was really fun. I worked at the table at the front of Lincoln, and to watch students come in with their front of their hoodies filled with 5 cans of food, and to think that they either went home and raided their own pantries or thought enough to go and get something at the store before coming to the game when they came by themselves without parents or whatever. It was just a really fun thing to see. And I know I talked to one of my coworkers who has a daughter that plays for Washington, and they had collected donations, and he said that they had gotten over $1,000, and they spent 4 hours at Hy-Vee shopping. They had cart after cart after cart. Hy-Vee had a sale of 3 canned goods for $1. And it took them that long to shop, to pay, and then haul it all into Washington High School. So I just thought what a great example of something cool that our high school students did to come together as a community to really give back to the people that they know they go to school with, all these students who need the food. So I just thought that was kind of a cool thing we wanted to do guys with.
I would like to commend Molly, who organized the vaping town hall meeting on Monday night. It was very well attended. It was very informative, and I just feel like we are helping our parents and children to be educated about the health concerns about vaping. And if you didn't have a chance to watch it, it will be repeated on K-Learn as well as on the YouTube channel, I believe, too. So. If not, meeting's adjourned. We'll read all the order for Southeast at 4 o'clock. Thank you. It's work session. You can do that, right? Okay. Okay. Why did